Telling a Narrative Through Print and Textiles, my final major project by Matilda Jansen. For my final major project at Northumbria, I wanted to translate my love of outdoor travel into a contemporary fashion context. I explored traditional outdoors wear and reworked it through references of early female pioneers, using this to develop structured, modern silhouettes. I used natural dye as a key reference point, both to explore sustainability and to reflect the values of slow fashion. I documented this process by speaking with natural dyers in the Northeast, gaining insight into their techniques and approaches. I then took this further by exploring my own local environment, using the surrounding ecology as inspiration for my print development. After developing my prints, I continued experimenting with dye by exploring techniques such as rusting and ice dyeing. I also tested synthetic dyes alongside natural dye processes. To document this journey, I created a short film titled Foraging for Colour, which captures my exploration into natural dye in a more playful and visual way. Building on this, I used the fabrics, collecting their process to hand paint and further develop my textiles. This stage became highly experimental, where I tested a range of techniques and documented each step. It highlights the time-intensive nature of the process, showing the care and hours spent dyeing and sampling and refining each piece. For my final major project, I developed a brand called Cuckoo, where I brought together my exploration of natural dye and hand-painted textiles into a structured garment. I focused on applying these techniques to a jacket, using dye in a more considered and deliberate way. I began to place colour in areas that worked with the shape of the garment, such as within the pleats and across the sleeves. This allowed the dye to sit more naturally within the design, enhancing the structure and creating a more tactile, intentional finish. Once I had developed a hand-painted fabric, I began exploring different embellishment and surface techniques. Through printing and embroidery, I discovered a particular interest in foil binding, which I used to layer over the naturally dyed fabric, adding a contrast to offset the softer organic quality of the dye with a more reflective and textured finish. I applied this technique across both natural fabrics and technical nylon, which I later used within my skirt. As the process developed, I became more intentional with placement, working into specific areas of the fabric by hand-painting the binding medium and combining this to screen printing. This allowed me to control where the embellishment sat, ensuring it worked with the structure of the garment while building depth and variation across the surface. After introducing foil binding to add a reflective finish, I continued to build surface detail onto the dyed and printed fabrics. I developed this further using both machine and hand embroidery, using it not only decoratively, but also with functional purpose. This included embroidering eyelets along the centre front of the jacket, as well as reinforcing areas of the skirt where the bungee cord sits, such as on the waistband. I also carried these techniques through to my promotional bag, using the same fabric to maintain consistency across the collection. This approach allowed the embellishment to feel integrated within the garment, combining surface detail with structure and function. After creating my final fabric and garment, I began to consider how the brand could be promoted in a way that reflects its values. This led to the development of Betty, a cloth doll who acts as a central figure of the project. She represents the playful and crafted nature of the work, while also bringing together different audiences through a shared sense of curiosity and storytelling. Betty was designed as a stop-motion figure constructed with button joints so that she can move and interact with objects. She can also be attached to my promotional bag using her eyelet hand, linking her physically to the product. I then created a miniature version of my final look for her, carefully replicating the pleats, stitching, and fabric details of both the jacket and skirt. This process mirrored the time and care involved in the full-scale garments, reinforcing the idea of slow fashion. Betty was brought to life through a stop-motion film and later incorporated into both my test and final shoots. She acts as a symbolic figure within the project, a character who carries the narrative forward and represents survival, craft, and continuity within this imagined world. After developing Betty, I moved on to constructing my final garment. I began by toiling and testing different approaches, particularly through fabric manipulation, to refine the shape and structure. This process led to a test shoot with a model, allowing me to see how the garment performed when worn. The skirt demonstrates adjustable elements, which were carried through into the final piece using technical fabric, alongside the developed print and embroidery details. These features balance both function and surface design, staying true to the concept. My final test shoot was photographed in Northumberland with my friend, placing the garment within a natural environment. It reflects the brand's connection to landscape while also showing how the piece can exist across different contexts, reinforcing that it is not limited to a single demographic.